What you're looking at right now has been lost for over 800 years. This is medieval Paris in 1200 AD, and it looks absolutely nothing like the city you know today. There was no Eiffel Tower, no Louvre Palace, and most shocking of all, no Notre Dame Cathedral. Instead, there was something far more incredible that 99% of people have never seen. In the next 25 minutes, I'm going to show you the complete transformation of Paris using cutting-edge AI reconstructions that took months to create. You'll see the wooden bridges that collapsed under their own weight, killing hundreds, the royal palace that vanished without a trace, and the medieval streets so narrow that neighbors could literally shake hands from their windows. But first, let me show you something that will completely change how you think about medieval cities. Paris began on this tiny island, Isle de la Cité. But in medieval times, it looked completely different from today. What you're seeing now is our AI reconstruction of the island in 1100 AD, based on archaeological evidence, medieval manuscripts, and years of historical research. Notice there's no Gothic Notre Dame Cathedral. Instead, there's the old Romanesque Cathedral of Saint-Étienne. Much smaller, much darker, built like a fortress rather than the soaring masterpiece we know today. This earlier cathedral had thick walls, tiny windows, and heavy stone arches that created an atmosphere more like a tomb than a place of worship. The royal palace dominated the western tip of the island, but it wasn't the elegant structure you might imagine. It was the Palais de la Cité, a massive fortress built for survival, not beauty. Kings lived here, surrounded by walls thick enough to withstand siege engines, with narrow windows that could serve as archer positions. The most shocking difference: the bridges. Medieval Paris had wooden bridges that regularly collapsed or burned down. The Petit Pont collapsed in 1196, killing dozens of people who fell into the freezing Seine. The famous Pont Neuf, the new bridge, wouldn't exist for another 400 years. Medieval Parisian streets were nothing like the wide boulevards Baron Haussmann would create in the 1800s. They were so narrow that a person could literally reach across and touch the building on the other side. Our AI reconstruction shows you exactly what it was like to walk through these claustrophobic medieval corridors. The streets had no names. People navigated by landmarks, like the house with the red door or near the baker's oven that burned down last winter. There were no street numbers, no addresses as we know them. If you wanted to find someone, you asked around until someone recognized the description. And the smell. Historical records describe it as overwhelming. Open sewers ran down the middle of streets, mixed with animal waste from horses, pigs, and chickens that roamed freely. Butchers threw blood and entrails directly into the street. Tanners soaked animal hides in urine. The stench was so bad that wealthy people carried perfumed handkerchiefs just to breathe. But here's what's fascinating. Despite the chaos, medieval Paris was incredibly vibrant. Our reconstruction shows the bustling markets where merchants sold everything from exotic spices to live animals. The craftsmen's workshops where master artisans created works of art, and the constant flow of pilgrims heading to the cathedral. On the western tip of Isle de la Cité stood one of medieval Europe's most magnificent royal palaces, and today, almost nothing remains. What you're seeing is our complete AI reconstruction of the Palais de la Cité as it appeared in 1300 AD, when it was the beating heart of French power. This wasn't just a palace, it was an entire complex covering nearly half the island. The Great Hall could hold over 1,000 people for royal feasts. Imagine the scene. Hundreds of nobles in silk and fur, servants carrying platters of roasted peacock and swan, musicians playing in the galleries above, and the king presiding over it all from a throne carved from a single piece of oak. The Seine Chapelle, which still exists today, was built by King Louis IX to house the crown of thorns, one of Christianity's most sacred relics. But what you can't see today are the royal apartments that surrounded it. Our reconstruction shows rooms decorated with tapestries worth more than entire villages, heated by massive fireplaces that consumed entire trees, and filled with treasures from across the known world. Before the Gothic masterpiece we know today, there was another cathedral on this exact spot, and it was completely different. Our AI reconstruction reveals the Romanesque Cathedral of Saint-Étienne, which stood here for over 300 years before, being demolished to make way for Notre Dame. This earlier cathedral was much smaller, darker, and built in the older Romanesque style. Thick walls, small windows, and heavy stone arches created an atmosphere that was more fortress than the soaring Gothic space we know today. The ceiling was low and oppressive, supported by massive pillars that blocked sightlines and made the interior feel cramped. The construction of Gothic Notre Dame began in 1163, but it took nearly 200 years to complete. Our reconstruction shows you the incredible construction process. The wooden scaffolding that rose higher than any building in Paris. The stonemasons who carved each block by hand. The incredible engineering that allowed them to build higher and lighter than ever before. Medieval Paris was a trading powerhouse, and the heart of commerce was the right bank. Our AI reconstruction shows you the bustling markets that made Paris one of Europe's wealthiest cities. The Grand Châtelet fortress controlled access to the city from the north. Every merchant had to pay taxes here before entering Paris with their goods. The markets stretched along the riverbank, fishmongers selling fresh catch from the Seine, grain merchants from the surrounding countryside, and luxury traders bringing silk from Constantinople and spices from the Orient. But the most important trade was in knowledge. Paris was becoming Europe's intellectual center, with scholars coming from across the continent to study. Our reconstruction shows you the early University of Paris, where students lived in cramped quarters and attended lectures in Latin, creating the foundation for modern higher education. What was it actually like to live in medieval Paris? Our AI reconstructions reveal the shocking reality of daily life 800 years ago. Most Parisians lived in wooden houses that were constantly at risk of fire. The Great Fire of 1188 destroyed much of the city, which is why building codes eventually required stone construction. Families of 6 or 8 people often lived in a single room, sharing their space with chickens, pigs, and other livestock. Water came from public wells, or the Seine, the same river used as a sewer. Disease spread rapidly through the crowded streets. The average life expectancy was just 35 years. Yet despite these hardships, medieval Parisians created a vibrant culture of craftsmanship, learning, and community that laid the foundation for the Paris we know today. By 1300 AD, Paris was changing rapidly. Our AI reconstruction shows you the city at the height of medieval prosperity, just before the disasters that would reshape it forever. The population had grown to over 200,000 people, making it one of Europe's largest cities. New neighborhoods were expanding beyond the old walls. The university was attracting students from across Europe. Trade was booming, and the royal court was at the peak of its power. But change was coming. The 100 Years' War, the Black Death, and political upheaval would transform medieval Paris into something completely different. The wooden buildings would give way to stone. The narrow streets would be widened, and the medieval world would slowly disappear. Today, almost nothing visible remains of medieval Paris. The royal palace was demolished. The old cathedral was replaced, and Baron Haussmann's renovations in the 1800s swept away most of the medieval street pattern. But if you know where to look, traces remain. The Seine still stands as a jewel of Gothic architecture. Some medieval street patterns survive in the Marais district, and deep beneath modern Paris, archaeologists continue to uncover the foundations of the medieval city. Through AI reconstruction, we can bring this lost world back to life and understand how a small island in the Seine became one of the world's greatest cities. Medieval Paris may be gone, but its spirit lives on in the city of light we know today.